The silver blade of the tape measure struck the reclaimed oak floorboards of my Cotswold cottage with a sharp, metallic snap that echoed off the ancient lime-plastered walls. Brooke did not ask for permission. She simply shoved my late husband's hand-carved writing desk 2 inches to the left, letting its sturdy wooden legs scrape a harsh, protesting line across the dark finish I had spent 40 summers waxing. My son, Nathan, lingered near the heavy oak front door of our Gloucestershire home, holding a cardboard tray of artisan lattes while his eyes remained completely glued to his smartphone screen. His thumb flicked upward in steady, robotic strokes, oblivious to the intrusion. Brooke snapped the metal blade back into its housing, brushed off the lint from her high-end designer trousers, and surveyed the room with a cold, analytical eye. The square footage in this ground floor is entirely wasted on bulky antique furniture, Evelyn, Brooke announced, gesturing broadly through the historic stone-mullioned windows that looked out onto the rolling green hills. If we knock out this structural partition between the country kitchen and the main parlor, the entire floor plan breathes. We can easily clear £70,000 on the open market by next spring. I set my ceramic mug down onto a cork coaster with deliberate slowness. At 68, I knew the pulse of this house. Every creak of the floorboards was a heartbeat, a memory etched deeply into the stone of the Gloucestershire countryside. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't engage in a shouting match. I simply stood, walked across the room, gripped the edge of the heavy oak desk, and slid it precisely back to its original sun-faded mark on the floor. "The walls stay exactly where they are, Brooke," I stated calmly, keeping my tone level and unyielding. Brooke turned with a bright, tight smile that didn't reach her hollow eyes. "Mom, we have to look at this Cotswold real estate market realistically. You spend half your week maintaining 4 bedrooms you don't even use. A tiny modern flat in Cheltenham would give you 0 maintenance. And Nathan wouldn't have to drive down from London every weekend to check the damp course. Nathan hadn't checked my damp course in over 2 years. I hired a local tradesman from the village every autumn to handle it." Without a word, I picked up my pruning shears from the console table, brushed past them toward the back door, and stepped out into the crisp English air. But as I closed the heavy oak door behind me, a cold knot twisted in my stomach. This was no longer a casual family visit. For 3 years, Tuesday evenings had meant slow-roasted lamb, warm Yorkshire puddings, and washing Nathan's work shirts in my heavy-duty basement utility room. Ever since Brooke moved into his London flat the previous winter, the Tuesday ritual had morphed into something sinister. It now included demands for organic groceries from the upscale organic market, in Morton and Marsh, specific imported wines, and my best leftovers, packed neatly into airtight plastic containers for her office lunches. They were treating my historic family home like a free country hotel with a built-in maid service. Worse still, something darker lingered beneath Brooke's calculating demeanor. 2 nights prior, I had woken up at 3:00 a.m. to the faint, eerie click of the back door latch. Peering down the dark hallway, I saw the silhouette of someone rifling through my mahogany bureau, where I kept my grandfather's vintage pocket watch, and more importantly, the original paper, deeds to the freehold estate. When I called out, the shadowy figure slipped out into the moonlit garden like a ghost. Brooke had laughed it off the next morning, claiming she was merely looking for paracetamol, but the incident left a chilling realization settling over me. They weren't just waiting for me to downsize. They were actively mapping out a way to take the house from under me. The following Tuesday, I decided my kitchen was officially closed for good. At precisely 5:30 p.m., Nathan's silver sedan crunched up the gravel driveway. He walked through the front door carrying 2 overflowing plastic laundry baskets, while Brooke followed closely behind clutching an empty designer tote bag, ready to plunder my pantry. They stopped dead in the hallway. The house was shrouded in an unnatural, heavy silence. The kitchen lights were completely off, the old Aga cooker was stone cold, and the dining table was entirely bare. "Mom," Nathan called out, dropping the heavy laundry baskets onto the flagstones with a loud, echoing thud. I sat quietly in my wingback reading chair by the bay window, a weathered leather-bound novel resting in my lap. I slowly closed the cover and looked up into the dimming light. "Good evening, Nathan." Brooke flipped the wall switch twice, her eyes darting across the empty, shadowed countertops. "Where is dinner? We're absolutely starving. And I need these silk blouses washed on a delicate cold cycle before my board meeting in the city on Thursday. I am no longer cooking on Tuesdays," I explained, my voice completely devoid of apology or warmth. "And the commercial laundromat down in Burton-on-the-Water has excellent heavy-duty washers. They are open until 10:00 p.m. Nathan blinked, shifting his weight uncomfortably from foot to foot. "Wait, you didn't cook. We drove all the way down from the Cotswold Way for this. You could have warned us. You are 30 years old, Nathan." "You can manage your own meals," I replied, picking up my book again. "If you want to stay and order a takeaway, you are welcome to, but the laundry machines downstairs are unplugged and locked." Brooke's jaw tightened until her teeth clicked audibly. She grabbed the handle of her tote bag, her knuckles turning bone white. Without a single word, she spun on her heel and marched straight out the front door. Nathan scrambled hurriedly to follow her, casting a bewildered, helpless glance in my direction. The silence that settled over the house afterward felt like a profound, long-awaited relief. Yet the pressure didn't recede. It escalated into outright predatory aggression. By the second week of August, the subtle hints mutated into brazen overstepping. I was on the front stone porch, watering my cascading hanging geraniums, when a sleek white Range Rover parked right by my front gate. A sharp-looking woman in a tailored navy blazer stepped out, carrying a professional clipboard and a high-end digital camera around her neck. She marched up my gravel path with absolute, unearned confidence. "Hello there," she greeted with a glittering, practiced smile, holding out a laminated business card. "I'm Sarah, an independent estate agent based in Cirencester. Brooke sent me over to take some preliminary interior and exterior marketing photos for an off-market listing." My fingers tightened instinctively around the brass handle of my watering can. I reached out, took the card, turned it over to inspect the agency stamp, and then handed it right back to her chest. "Brooke does not hold the title, deeds, or any legal interest in this property," I stated, my voice dropping an octave into freezing stillness. The agent blinked, her confident facade cracking as she grew visibly flustered. "Oh, she explicitly indicated that the estate was being prepared for an accelerated family transfer this quarter. She already emailed me the full room measurements last week. Brooke is my son's wife," I corrected her, brushing a stray leaf from my apron. "She has zero legal authority to list, show, or photograph this historic residence. If you take a single step across my threshold or snap one photo of my home, I will have you charged with criminal trespassing." The agent's face flushed a deep, humiliated crimson. She stammered a frantic apology, turned on her heel, and practically sprinted back to her Range Rover, tires spitting gravel as she sped away down the country lane before I even turned off the outdoor tap. 10 minutes later, my mobile phone buzzed violently on the kitchen worktop. It was Nathan. I let it ring out completely. I walked calmly to the hallway, lifted the spare brass house key off the decorative wall hook, slipped on my cardigan, and drove my old Morris Minor straight into the village hardware store. By 3:00 p.m. that afternoon, a professional locksmith had replaced both the front and back deadbolts with heavy-duty security locks. When Nathan called again that evening, his voice was loud, shrill, and panicked. "Mom, my key won't work in the front door." And a frantic estate agent called Brooke claiming you threatened her with the police today. "What on earth is going on? You handed your spare key to a commercial real estate agent without my permission," I replied smoothly, staring out at the darkening garden. "You have permanently forfeited the privilege of holding a key to my home. Good night, Nathan." I terminated the call and threw the deadbolt into place. They didn't wait long to retaliate. On the following Sunday afternoon, Nathan and Brooke arrived in full force, hammering their fists against the front wood, until I finally slid the bolt back. Brooke carried a sleek leather portfolio tucked tightly under her arm. They shoved their way past me into the parlor without an invitation, sitting together on the sofa as a united, hostile front. I took my single wingback armchair directly across from them. Brooke unzipped her portfolio with theatrical flair and pulled out a stack of crisp, printed legal-looking documents. "Mom, we are done playing games. The situation has reached a critical financial emergency." She shoved a piece of paper across the oak coffee table. "Nathan's London lease expires in 3 months, and the rental market is entirely broken. Keeping £400,000 trapped in these archaic stone walls while your only son throws money away on rent makes zero financial sense." Nathan kept his eyes stubbornly fixed on the Persian rug. "Mom, she just means the timing is perfect. You don't need all the space. If we sell this place right now, we can use the equity to buy a sprawling manor together outside Oxford. You can have the converted basement suite. We need to consolidate family assets." Brooke nodded eagerly, her eyes gleaming with avarice. "Exactly. It's about generational wealth protection. You are sitting on a goldmine out of sheer, stubborn vanity while we struggle to climb the property ladder." I looked down at the dense legal spreadsheet, then pushed it calmly back across the table with one finger. "My home is not your collateral. I am not a village bank vault waiting to be plundered." Brooke scoffed loudly, crossing her arms over her chest. "You are being profoundly selfish. Nathan is your only legal heir. This house belongs to him eventually anyway. We are simply asking you to be practical and hand over your inheritance while it can actually change our lives, not when you're in the ground." "Inheritance," I repeated, letting the heavy, morbid word hang in the chilling silence of the room. "You are talking about my death as if it were a pre-booked holiday." Nathan finally looked up, his face flushed with embarrassment. "That isn't what she meant, Mom." "It is precisely what she meant," I countered, standing up tall to tower over them. "I built this life with my own hands and my late husband's sweat. You can build your own. This conversation is finished." Brooke assumed my icy dismissal meant total surrender. In her twisted logic, she believed she had planted her flag, and that my age would eventually force me to capitulate. She started dropping off glossy brochures for assisted living retirement complexes on my kitchen island whenever they visited uninvited. I tossed every single one straight into the outdoor incinerator. Instead of engaging in further screaming matches, I initiated a secret, massive operation. I purchased dozens of heavy-duty cardboard packing crates and began sorting through 30 years of accumulated history. I boxed up old winter linens, donated my late husband's carpentry tools to the village youth center, and completely cleared out the dusty attic. When Brooke stopped by one evening and spotted a towering stack of taped boxes lining the hallway, a genuine, victorious smile stretched across her face. "See, Nathan," she whispered loudly enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "She's packing. She knows we were right all along. It just takes an old mind a minute to adjust to reality." I wiped down the kitchen counter and let them swim in their own delusions. I wasn't packing for a tiny basement suite under their oppressive thumb. I was clearing the house because an immaculate, empty estate photographs infinitely better for a high-end private sale. For the past 2 weeks, I had been holding discreet, confidential meetings with a private property acquisitions agent from London, a cash buyer who purchased historical Cotswold assets entirely as is, with zero need for public listings, yard signs, or open houses. He had walked through my home on a Wednesday morning, while Nathan and Brooke were trapped in city traffic. He fell instantly in love with the exposed stonework, the original flagstones, and the secluded acre of land. We agreed on a substantial cash sum. No mortgages, no surveying delays, no estate agency chains. The legal paperwork was moving at lightning speed, and I needed every trace of my personal life boxed up before the final transfer date at the end of the month. Brooke patted one of the sealed cardboard boxes on her way out the door that night, practically purring. "Let me know if you need help picking out a nice assisted living studio apartment, Mom. I have a brilliant contact in Cheltenham." I will handle my own living arrangements entirely, I replied evenly, and for the first time in months, I smiled back at her with genuine amusement. The final, catastrophic straw snapped on a Thursday morning. My mobile phone vibrated with a sharp text message from Brooke. It wasn't a request, it was a dictatorship directive. My parents are flying in from Chicago next week for an extended autumn holiday. We simply don't have the spare room in our London flat. They will be occupying your guest room from the 12th to the 19th. Please ensure the Egyptian cotton sheets are freshly laundered and the ensuite bathroom is completely cleared of your painting supplies. I stared at the glowing screen, my blood turning to ice. She was actively treating my historic sanctuary as her personal, free boutique hotel for visiting in-laws. I placed the phone down on the wooden counter, grabbed my car keys, and drove straight to the hardware and home improvement store in the nearest market town. I purchased 2 gallons of striking, industrial-grade crimson paint, a heavy-duty drop cloth, and a commercial-grade mortise deadbolt lock set. When I returned home, I immediately stripped the guest room bed, dragged the heavy mattress down into the damp root cellar, and completely dismantled the oak bed frame with a wrench. I moved all my oil easels, large canvases, and pungent turpentine bottles from the dark corner of the basement right into the center of the pristine guest room. Splashing deliberate strokes of crimson paint across the old floorboards to seal the transformation into a chaotic, messy art studio. I installed the new heavy-duty mortise lock on the door and clicked it firmly shut. When Brooke arrived the following Friday afternoon, dragging her mother's oversized designer suitcase up my front steps, I met them right in the timber-framed entryway. "Which room is ours, Linda?" "I'm absolutely exhausted from the Heathrow flight," Brooke's mother asked, peering curiously down the narrow hallway. "I am afraid there has been a terrible misunderstanding," I said, politely blocking the corridor with my arms crossed. "I no longer have a guest room. I permanently converted that space into an active oil painting studio." Brooke dropped the heavy suitcase handle with a sharp crash against the flagstones. "What on earth are you babbling about?" "I texted you the exact dates. Where are we supposed to sleep then?" her mother stammered, her face flushing with indignation. "There is a very comfortable, 4-star boutique hotel just 3 miles down the Fossway," I offered, pulling a printed local map from my apron pocket and handing it directly to her mother. "I highly recommend their full English breakfast buffet." Brooke's face turned a violent shade of purple with unbridled rage. She had been publicly humiliated in front of her own parents. Snatching the map and grabbing the suitcase handle, she hissed, "Come on, Mom, we're leaving this madhouse," and stormed down the driveway. I quietly closed the heavy front door, slid the deadbolt home, and returned to my studio to finish my landscape canvas. The final, inevitable showdown arrived precisely at 2:00 p.m. on Sunday. The atmospheric pressure in the room felt suffocating. Nathan marched up the gravel driveway first, his shoulders locked rigidly, but it was Brooke who carried the heavy manila legal folder like a weapon. They didn't even bother ringing the brass doorbell. Nathan automatically reached for his old key, only to find the new lock refusing to yield, prompting him to slam his fist hard against the ancient oak paneling. I opened the door and stepped back, letting them storm into the hall. Brooke marched straight into the dining room and slammed the manila folder down onto the timber table with a deafening crack. "Sit down, Mom. We are completely done playing your childish games," Brooke snapped, yanking the folder open. I calmly pulled out my chair and seated myself with absolute composure. Nathan stood rigidly behind Brooke, refusing to meet my eyes, staring fixedly at the floorboards. "My parents had to spend over £1,000 on a hotel this week because of your malicious spite," Brooke snarled, pulling out a thick stack of printed legal documents. "Your behavior is entirely unhinged, but we are going to fix this right this second." She spun the papers around to face me across the table. "We had a high-end property solicitor draft these emergency papers this morning. It is an irrevocable quitclaim deed and an immediate cash-out refinancing agreement. You are going to sign the house over to Nathan and me today. We will extract £150,000 in equity, for our own down payment, on a Cotswold estate. And you can stay here as our tenant or move out. Nathan finally found a wavering shred of voice, though it trembled violently. It's my birthright, Mom. I need it now. You're just being cruel and selfish by holding onto walls you won't even use in 10 years. I looked down at the dense legal forms. They had filled out every single field with meticulous greed, leaving only the signature lines gaping blank at the bottom. They genuinely believed they could bully an old woman into signing away the roof over her head on a Sunday afternoon. I didn't yell. I didn't shed a single tear. I simply pushed their stack of worthless paperwork aside with 2 fingers, reached into the deep pocket of my wool cardigan, and pulled out my own crisp, sealed white DL envelope. You want to talk about the legal title and ownership of this house, I stated, my voice cutting through the thick air like a scalpel as I placed my envelope dead center on the table. Go ahead, Brooke, open it. Brooke's eyes flashed with triumphant malice. She snatched the envelope, fully expecting to see the original property deeds ready for her ink. She ripped the paper flap open, pulled out the single stapled document, and flipped straight to the first page. Her eyes scanned the bold institutional header, darting down to the official land registry seal and the final financial transfer clause. In an instant, her smug, triumphant expression shattered completely. The color drained so fast from her cheeks that her face turned stark, ghostly white. She dropped the document onto the wood table as if it had burst into roaring flames. What is this?" she whispered, her voice cracking into a horrified squeak. This can't be real." Nathan leaned awkwardly over her shoulder, squinting frantically at the small print. "Mom, whose name is stamped on this?" "What did you do?" "That is the official land registry final closing disclosure," I explained, my tone crystal clear and perfectly steady. "I sold the freehold estate last Thursday to a private cash buyer, represented by an international acquisition fund. The full funds cleared securely into my private bank account 48 hours ago. And the new legal owner takes physical possession of the property in exactly 21 days. Nathan stumbled backward, his spine slamming hard against the whitewashed plaster wall. You sold my inheritance. You actually sold it out from under us," he choked out, staring at me as if I were a total stranger. "I sold my house," I corrected him sharply, standing up to look him straight in the eye. "The house I paid for with my own labor, the house I maintained while your father was gone. Your inheritance is whatever lawful assets I choose to leave behind when my time comes. But this physical property is no longer mine, which means it was never yours to plan your parasitic future around." Brooke slammed both palms down onto the table, completely losing her composure as a hysterical panic took over. "You cannot legally do this. We needed that equity. We structured our entire relocation and business investments around this money. Where are we supposed to get our deposit now?" "You will earn it," I replied coldly, walking toward the parlor doorway. "Exactly the way my husband and I did, through hard work, not extortion." Brooke completely lost control, pacing the historic dining room and screaming about moral obligations. About how family is supposed to sacrifice everything, and how I had maliciously ruined their lives. She pointed a shaking, manicured finger directly at my face. "You are a cold, wicked, narcissistic woman. You are throwing your own flesh and blood into the gutter out of sheer spite." I remained standing entirely unaffected by her violent tantrum, anchored by the absolute peace of my own mind. "I am protecting my sanctuary. You viewed me as a fragile obstacle sitting on a pile of cash." I simply removed the cash from the equation permanently. Nathan stared down at the floorboards, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, looking less like a grown man and more like a terrified, trapped child. "Where are you even going to live, Mom?" he mumbled, his voice small and defeated. I reached back into my cardigan pocket and pulled out a single, glossy architectural photograph. I slid it across the table toward him. It depicted a charming, single-story Cotswold stone cottage nestled quietly on the edge of a reed-fringed lake 2 counties over, surrounded by weeping willows and wild water lilies. I bought this, I said softly. In full cash. It has a lovely wild garden, a bright kitchen, and exactly one cozy bedroom. There is no basement suite for storage. There is no guest room for uninvited house guests. It is entirely mine. Brooke snatched up her leather portfolio, aggressively shoving her useless, rejected refinancing papers back inside while breathing heavily, her eyes swimming with frustrated tears. Come on, Nathan, we're leaving this toxic place. She clearly doesn't care about us or our future. I care about you deeply, Nathan, I said, looking right past Brooke's fury to my son. But I will not be your financial institution, and I refuse to be bullied in my own home. He didn't offer a single word of argument. He simply turned around and followed his wife out the front door, the heavy oak panels swinging shut behind them. The new commercial deadbolt clicked solidly into place. 3 weeks later, I stood on the front gravel path of the old Cotswold cottage for the very last time, handing the heavy brass keys over to a polite young couple who had purchased the property through the investment fund. I watched them step excitedly across the threshold, ready to plant their own roots. I climbed into my Morris Minor, drove out of the village lane, and never once checked the rearview mirror. My new lakeside cottage was everything I had ever dreamed of: quiet, manageable, and profoundly peaceful. The morning sun broke golden across the water, and my new neighbors were kind, salt-of-the-earth people who understood the sacred boundary of a closed garden gate. Nathan called me precisely a month after my relocation. His tone was remarkably subdued. He informed me that he and Brooke had been forced to renew the lease on their cramped London flat at a significantly higher rate. He paused awkwardly on the line, lingering in the exact silence where he used to wait for me to offer financial rescue. I did not offer a single pound. I simply told him that I hoped they could budget their expenses more carefully moving forward. The conversation ended shortly after that. Brooke predictably refused to speak to me entirely, which suited my peaceful new existence down to the ground. I spent my mornings painting water lilies in the sunroom and my afternoons walking along the damp, reed-lined banks of the lake. I didn't need to hire aggressive barristers or engage in screaming matches. I simply needed to remember that my home, my finances, and my life belonged entirely to me. When Brooke first dragged that stiff yellow tape measure across my hardwood floors, she thought she was sizing up her future inheritance. She never realized she was measuring the exact distance I was willing to put between my peace and her greed. If you enjoyed this story of reclaiming boundaries and finding peace, please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next story.